Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meetup. Thank you for joining on Saturday morning. So we all have joined here today, like every other meetup. Only thing is that we are doing this meetup completely virtual for the first time. So I see many of you are joining for the first time. So I thought I would take you through the basic introduction of our community. So our community we have named as DelhiTUG, Delhi Tableau User Group. Uh, who are we and what we do? We are a group of enthusiastic professionals working in different organizations on Tableau or related technologies. Our motto is mainly we come together, learn and share new stuff, whatever it might be related to Tableau. We have been doing this meetup since last almost 2 years, a bit more than 2 years. Initially, we started as a Tableau-based community. Then we joined hands with Tableau uh, and became official Tableau user group. So we have been running this for almost last 2 years. We have been regularly organizing meetups. So let me take you through who all are part of this DelhiTUG and Tableau West team. So I am Lakshya Dhamija, myself leading DelhiTUG. Then we have Lakshmi, who is leading Hyderabad TUG along with Ravi Gajula. Then in our core team, we have Chetna Gupta and Nisha. So here is a complete list of all the speakers we have had over last 2 years. Many of you must have already attended the sessions, so you must be knowing a couple of them. So till now, what we have been doing, we have been organizing physical meetups where most of the meetups were organized in Fidelity International, as it was quite helping in giving us the place to organize meetups, inviting more and more people. But we have also hosted our meetups at Srijan Technologies and also Sapient in Gurgaon. This is a glimpse of our journey, what we have been through. We have hosted quite a lot of sessions till now, so we have got a huge audience. Yeah, so here are the contacts or links how you can get in touch with us. So we have our contact Lakshay, Lakshmi and Ravi. Also we have our email ID there, so whoever has any query related to our meetup can directly reach out to us using this email ID. Also we have our group listed on DelhiTUG community under community on Tableau side. So now handing over to Manish so that he could start with his sessions. Good morning, Manish.
Hey, Laksha. Good morning.
Yeah. So you are on now. Good luck.
All right. Thanks a lot. Hi,
And also
everyone.
one more thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add. So if you have any questions, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom meeting. So you can put up all your questions there and we'll take it side by side as much as possible. Thank you, guys. Okay. You're good to go, Manish.
All right. Um, Hi, everyone. This is Manish. I work for Thought Focus Technologies. I'll start with my brief introduction first, right? So I work for Thought Focus Technologies and have been an active member of the Delhi TOG uh, user group for quite some time now. This meetup group is more than 2 years old, but I, started actively participating in this group after 6 months of this being into existence. So pretty much for the last 1.5 years. Uh, this session is going to get recorded. That's one more thing which you guys should know. And you guys are going to receive an email post this event, maybe by Monday, with a link to the recording that you can refer to later as well. Some of the material that we are going to use in this presentation today, these are going to be shared as well. When I say these material, what I'm referring to is the Tableau workbooks that we are going to use, as well as any other reference material. Uh, in my case, it's not going to be any PPT, but I'm primarily going to be using Tableau workbook, so a TWBX file, along with a Python notebook, where I'll be using Seaborn to help you guys understand how we can actually very simply chart using Python libraries. Like Akshay has already said, I'm just reiterating any questions that you may have. You can keep noting them down in the Q&A box. One of the admins is going to respond to your questions in the chat, in the Q&A box itself, and we'll make sure that we do good justice to all the questions that you guys send across, and we'll continue answering there. So with that, let me share my screen, and we can then get started. So, Laksha, can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
All right. All right. So let's get started, right? So Tableau in 2020.1, what they came up with is a very good feature, which they call as Viz animation. So what we are going to do today is first things first, we're going to see as to how Viz animations are created and what actually it is, right? So you may have seen already, there are these charts which people create and do kind of showcase as their work that they have done uh, all over the place. To name a few platforms, YouTube is one of them. LinkedIn is another, right? Where they show beautiful animations to show their data stories or tell their data stories in form of animations. So what I've done is I've already created a workbook with some of these animations. I'll quickly show you guys as to how they work, and then I will also show you guys how to actually create them. Trust me, this is a piece of cake. This is definitely not difficult at all. It requires just a click of a few buttons. So what I'll do is I'll probably go to one of these sheets and show you what exactly you need to do to enable Viz animation, if I may say so. So first things first, let me help you understand as to what this data is. And I'm sure anybody who has a Tableau background, who is not new to this world, would know what a global superstore data is. But for the benefit of people who does not know, there's a data set which Tableau provides as a test data set, which is a sales data for a hypothetical global superstore, and it has fields like uh, category of the product, customer name, the country in which these products are delivered, the region, shipping date, order date, and uh, subcategory, order priority, and stuff like that, right? That's for the dimensions. In the measures, we have fields like discount, profit, quantity, and sales. Now, for a superstore, I think most of these data items are pretty self-explanatory, so it does not need any explaining as such. Let me go back to the view and help you understand as to what I've tried to do here, right? So in the row shelf, you see a subcategory. So what I've tried to do is for all the subcategories for the products that this global superstore sells, I've tried to show their total, the sum of sales, right? So for phones, we have, let me increase this. Yeah. So for phones, we have for 1.7K dollars in sales, and then followed by copiers. And what I'm showing here is top 5 subcategories. Uh, and what I've also done is I have sorted them in descending order of sum of sales. So this is how the Viz has been created. Now important and then interesting thing that we need to look at is how do we enable Viz animation. So it is very simple. There is this new menu option in under formats that we need to go to. So under format, we have animations, and when you click on this, you see the animation control panel on the left side. Uh, we have this panel is pretty simple by default. If you launch it for the first time, it will be off. The only thing that you need to do is the only thing from the two-step process that you need to do is turn it on so that Viz animation is turned on, and then you need to select the speed for your animation. We have some presets in here, 0.3 seconds or fast, 0.5 seconds or medium. Then we have a preset which is 1 second or slow, and then we have a very slow preset for 2 seconds, right? So what does it mean is if you want your animation to be really slow, then you pick these time intervals which are bigger in magnitude, and what it will mean is if you let's say select 1 second slow, then every transition is going to take 1 second to complete. Now what do I mean by a transition? Let me quickly show you one example here. So let's say I have right now by default sorted it on descending order, and I want to actually change the sorting order. So you see how the bars actually changed their position. The bar which was appearing in the first row actually moved to the bottom, and the one which was down below moved gradually to the top. The same happened for the bar number 2 and 4. They changed their positions as well, and probably since we have an odd number of categories, subcategories here. The third one did not change its position, right? So let me show you this to you again. And now what I'll do is I'll probably decrease the speed even further by increasing the time of transition to 2 seconds. And this is going to be very slow. So now if you look at it, you very well can figure out how the bars are actually moving the position uh, based on where they need to go to. There will be a transition which will show up here. On the flip side, if you select these smaller numbers for second, then the transitions are going to be really fast, and it will be like super quick this way. So in terms of enabling Viz animation, what really needs to happen is two things. You go to format, you go to animations, and when you see the animations control panel on the left side, turn it on, and then select the duration for your transition. That is it. We have another setting in simultaneous and sequential. So what it means is if there are two transitions that needs to happen on a view or a dashboard, then how do you want these transitions to appear? Simultaneous would, when you select simultaneous, what happens is if there are two transitions that needs to happen, then both of them will happen simultaneously. If you select sequential, then they are going to follow an order. You will at any point in time be able to see just one transition. When the first one finishes, the second one will start, and it will move on like that. It's the default is simultaneous, and you can always try and play around with these options. Now, when you look down in this control panel, what you see is the same set of options are getting repeated. Now, why would that be the case? So the reason we have it set up like this is because the first set of options, which is duration and style, they are going to apply to the workbook. And if you want different duration and styles for different worksheets, then you can actually change it from here. What you can also do is you can, if you want, you can disable animation on any specific worksheet and still have it applied on the rest of them by turning it on the workbook level. So both of these, all of these options, the turning animation on, the duration of the animation and then the style of the animation. They are both configurable at the workbook level as well as at the sheet level. Uh, this functionality lets you actually turn it on and off on multiple worksheets simultaneously, as well as also let you control the speed differently on different worksheets. So let's say if you have two worksheets, then on one worksheet you can turn on the animation and keep the speed to very slow. On the other one, you can completely turn the animation off or keep it on, but uh, choose the speed to be a little different. So that is what it is. Like I said in the very beginning, turning on animation is a piece of cake, and it is super easy in Tableau. The way Tableau has been building functionalities which are super easy to for end users to use, since it's a tool for analysts. Uh, Turning on animation is also super easy. So now that I've shown you how this animation feature is enabled and what speed I've chosen, what I'll do is I'll change it back to slow and for the workbook, so that I have this enabled for all the sheets in my workbook. And then I will actually go back to the dashboard where uh, four such views are appearing, which I created one by one to show how we can actually create a dashboard where we can use animation to narrate our stories. The first one, the first one, the one on the left, top left, is showing the sum of sales across different countries. And we have also shown the numbers, the sales numbers for that country inside the country, right? So China is 701K, and Russia is 83K, Australia is 925K. So all of these are numbers, right? Sales numbers, the sum of sales numbers for these countries. What will happen is when, let's say, if I click on, let's say, Russia, then all of my bars are going to get changed based on the selection that I'm making. So what I've used here is a simple dashboard action, but then I have enabled animation on the rest of the three views which are being filtered, right? So the top one is sales by category. The second one is top 5 subcategories by sales. And the third one is sales by weekday. So it represents on which week of the day how much of the sales are happening. And since I've clicked on Russia, this is only for Russia. So there's going to be animation in all of these three based on the selections that I make in the map view. So when I reset it to default, all of my other three charts changed, but then they had uh, animation enabled. Let me quickly turn this off to make you understand as to what is happening when I'm turning the animation on. So when I turn the animation off, you see the bars, they just change instantly. There is no transition uh, which is happening. The bars are not having any transition. When I say transition, they're not they do not appear to be moving from one position to another. They just appear at whatever position they need to appear after applying the filter. Versus when you turn on animation, then all of these are going to move gradually based on the speed that you have chosen. So if I make it very slow, then it will be really slow. All right. One more thing that I want to show you is you can also do your custom duration. So you can even slow it down to not really recommended, but then as low as 5 seconds or whatsoever you want to put in. So we do have a custom duration setting as well. So with this, I'm kind of done with this dashboard where I quickly showed you how to uh, enable viz animation on any of the worksheets and how to use dashboard actions to actually uh, narrate your stories around the data. The second one, which is also another example which I built for you guys to look at some of the viz animation features, is based on life expectancy data. Now the source of the data is, I'll quickly show you where I've sourced this data from. Uh, so there's this website called ourworldindata.org, and it's a data mine, I can say. I mean, there is whole lot of demographics as well as other data which is available here, and you can actually go explore whatever you're looking for, and chances are you will find it all here, especially for the demographics, right? So and then the data is freely available for you to download and do whatever study that you want to do. So let's say if you want to study on health, then you have these uh, you know data sets available already as to you know what are the patterns across the world of smokers, or how's the trend on malaria and stuff like that, and then you can use them to actually chart and do your analysis. The one that shows up for demographics, which is population data, has world population growth, forecast for the population growth, and life expectancy. So the one that I picked is from this link here, life expectancy. This website not just gives you a brief context, but then also lets you chart some of these really quickly. And when you go to the data tab, you can actually download any of these in a CSV format. It's very easy, and you can actually do whatsoever. So if you look at the links on the left, what it shows is uh, specific data sets, right? So life expectancy versus GDP per capita for any country. So when you click on that link, it is going to plot it, but then you can go to the data sheet and then download it as well. So it is very simple. You just click on the link, and then the file sizes are really small, so it loads really quickly. So the one that I am using here is this file, which I've already downloaded. What it shows is life expectancy of women versus life expectancy of men. So the header of the file is, the name of the file is incorrect here. It's the life expectancy of men versus life expectancy of women. So this data actually tells you for each country, for each year, whether men lived more or women lived more. If I were to simplify uh, what exactly we mean by life expectancy. So this is the data around life expectancy for men and women. Right, so let me get back to Tableau again, and let me show you what I'm trying to do here. So again, I'm using Viz animation to narrate a story for you, and then we will try to find a few patterns, and then we'll try to understand as to why we could actually spot those patterns in this chart. So what is happening right now is, on the x-axis, if you see, we have life expectancy of women plotted. All these numbers are in years. And on the y-axis, we have life expectancy of men in number of years. Uh, if you see it right now, it's almost in a straight line, but then the line, the imaginary line that we can actually draw to uh, pierce through all of these circles uh, is something which is slightly tilted towards uh, the x-axis, right? So if I may say, uh, I mean, technically, the angle that this imaginary line would make with the x-axis is going to be less than 45 degrees, because it is tilted towards x-axis. So what it means is, and this is actually what the data is telling us is, the life expectancy of women all over the globe has been more than the life expectancy of men. Simplified, what it means is women live longer than men. And let's see if that is true, or if it has been true historically as well, and then how the trends have been over the years. So what we will do is we are going to yeah. So what we are going to do is we are going to see how the life expectancy of women versus men have changed, starting from 1950 to till whatever latest data we have available, and see what the trends are. So this is a animation where actually every time if you look at this number, this represents the year, and with every passing year, if you see, all of these bubbles are nicely and gradually moving towards the top right. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that the life expectancy is increasing over the years. I quickly paused this for now to show you some outlier, which is Cambodia. So if you observed, what happened is uh, after 1970, something happened in Cambodia, and just spot this right now. The life expectancy for both men and women dropped really drastically, right? And it became as low as 16 to 22 years. Now, why would that happen? We will quickly try and explore as to why that happened, and if this is something which is something we can relate with history or any historical event, or is it something which is something that we can deem as bad data, right? So we will look at Cambodia, something around 1970s. So that's one thing that we need to look at. The other one that we will now spot is there is something which happened with Timor as well, right? Life expectancy fell. If you look at Iran, it, you know, for a brief period fell off the pack and then got back to the pack again. Now something is happening in Rwanda around 1990s, right? So these are some of these outliers which are trying to tell some story. And what we can do is when we look into historical events, probably we will find some answers there. So what I will do now is let this chart complete its transition, see the end state, and then we will go back to figuring out what happened in the countries that interest us. So from the website that I showed you, we only have data available till 2015, so that's fine. We still see, and we have a story around the life expectancy, which is gradually over the years, starting from 1950 to 2015, the average life expectancy has increased, both for men and women, but then the trend remains the same. If you try to draw an imaginary line uh, through the pack of circles here, it'll still, if you could imagine, if it'll still be slightly uh, tilted towards the x-axis, which means that life expectancy of women still continues to be bigger and higher than men. So that trend continues, and overall what has happened is the life expectancy for both men and women have increased. Yeah, so these are some of the stories which really becomes apparent when we look at these in an animation form, the same data in an animation form. Now, how did we build this? So there's a slight difference in how we built this than the other charts, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So let me go back to the view itself, and if you have already used it, probably you noticed. If not, then this is a change that you should have observed. So what I have done is I have dragged the year field to pages, and the moment I do it, it puts in a control for the year, which appears on the right side. Now, what it does is pages lets you show 1 year worth of data at a time. And what it will do is it will let you uh, it will let you play it in a manner that you see the respective years of data, whatever you want to show as history, 1 year at a time. So animation is what? Frames changing one after the other lets you see or observe some kind of a motion, right? And that is what is happening here as well. If you show 1 year worth of data, wipe it and change the next year worth of data, and then wipe it again and show the third year worth of data, then what you actually perceive these three actions as something moving or transitioning from first state to second state to third state. And that is what is happening, right? Uh, the same control I used earlier as well. I can play it from anywhere. When I click on the play button, basically it is now showing 1971. Now it is showing 1972. It'll wipe off 1972 and move on to 1973, and then it'll try to move on till it reaches the end of the, the data, which is the latest year. So that is how this Viz animation is created. There are two ways we can do this. The first one is pages. Now, this is not a new feature as such. This feature existed in Tableau even in version 10. So, so what I have done here is tried to use both of these. I've tried to use the animations control panel for this to control the speed of it. And here, what the animation that we are trying to show is through the pages shelf. So with that, what I need to now do is, like I told you earlier, we spotted a few patterns, right, or outliers. So when we were looking at the data in after 1970, we saw that a few countries, their life expectancy was falling really drastically. So Cambodia, right, in and around 1970 is one thing that we noticed, right? When we look at 1980, then something happened here in Iran, which led to this falling, the life expectancy falling for a couple of years, and then it was back to where it was earlier. These metrics is right. So let's try and figure out as to what it may have happened. There's a really interesting exercise to do because once we have a historical event we can tie these with, then our resolve in the accuracy of this data really becomes stronger, and that's what we are doing going to do, right? So what I have already done is opened a few links that you can refer to, and this is as simple as you go and try to figure out in Google as to what may have happened in Cambodia uh, during the 1970s, right? And I mean, there is a whole lot of literature around it, which lets you know that there was a civil war in Cambodia, and Cambodia at that point in time lost around 25% of its population. 25% is one out of every four. And that led to the decrease in the uh, life expectancy during those period of around 8 years. It started in 1967, ended in 1975. The other one, which we spotted with Iran, was in 1980. And when you look at what happened in Iran, then it is very well documented that there was this war between Iran and Iraq, and Iran suffered a lot during those days. And that led to the drop in life expectancy numbers for Iran during 1980s. So pretty powerful stories. Yeah, when we build it the correct way and try to find out as to what may have led to these, we can always connect the dots. So that is that. The third chart. So moving on to the third dashboard. In today's world, I mean, uh, no analysis is complete if you do not bring in COVID data, right? And I've tried to do something with COVID as well. So again, this is going to be using animation, but then I wanted you guys to actually know something which is being more talked about, which is exponential growth. So let me first play the animation, and then I'll show you what exactly is my point that I want to instill in your heads. Uh, Before I start or hit the play button, let me first start by telling you that I purposely chose these two countries. Sorry, I said two. These 7 countries, so that we can actually limit our view to a few lines in the chart. And if I actually go ahead and plot all the countries, it's going to be very messy to identify the patterns that we are looking for. So in a sense, if you look at what we have here is um, till yesterday, the top 5 countries in terms of total cases reported for COVID-19, and I purposely added China and India. So this is top 5 countries plus China plus India, 7 of them. So let me start the animation, and this is going to play in medium speed. Um, and I want to show history. Yeah. So there are 2 charts. I'll explain you guys. First look at the animation, and then I'll explain as to how these 2 charts are trying to depict or narrate different stories. So yeah, so I just paused it for a while, right? So to tell you as to what's happening in both of these charts, right? So the one on the left is just counting the total number of cases, and this is going to show the total number of cases across the timeline for the 7 countries that I have picked. Uh, on the right side, what is happening is I'm showing how the number of reported cases have grown exponentially. uh, so if you look at and the axis for both the charts are different, right? So if you look at the chart on the left, you have the scale till 1400K, which is very close to where US is at right now. But when you look at the chart on the right, the axis looks slightly different, right? Uh, so if you look at this distance, this is 1 to 10, but for the same step size, uh, the next number states 100 instead of 20. Uh, why that is happening is because I'll quickly show you. I've changed the scale of this chart to logarithmic. This is no more a linear chart. Why I have done that is because if I do that, then it shows me uh, on a x and y scale if my cases are rising exponentially or not. But for you to be able to understand what exponential growth is, probably it'll need some explaining, right? So I'll probably give you an example. If I have let's say 10 cases reported on a day, and the next day I have 10 more cases, then the total number of cases are 20. But if you look at how the cases are rising, uh, the cases have doubled the very next day from a 10 to 20. So you can say the rate of increase is 100%. From a 10, it became 100, a 20. The third day, let's say, we again have 10 cases. Then we have 10 new cases. The total number of cases become 30. But what about the rate of increase? From a 20, now we became a 30. So the rate of increased has decreased to 50%. It is no more 100%. Had this been exponentially growing, on third day, our count should have been 40 and not 30. So exponential growth, uh, when we say, or when we refer to exponential growth, this is multiplicative. So we multiply by a factor. But when the growth is linear, then it is said to be additive. What it means is we need to be adding by a factor. So a linear growth would be 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, but exponential growth would be 10 into 10 into 10 into 10 into 10. Now look at this scale of how quickly the number would spiral up or grow when it comes to exponential growth. Now the problem with this chart on the left is it will always be increasing, and it will always tell you what is the total count at any given point in time, but it does not tell you how quickly my reported cases are rising. Is the rate of increase increasing, or is the rate of increase constant, or is the rate of increase decreasing? So that's something that we cannot tell from this chart. We can always see that these numbers will rise because of the nature of the virus. uh, it will keep infecting new and new people, so these numbers will rise. But what about the rate of the change? Is it spreading faster, or is it spreading slower than what happened, let's say, a week back or a month back, right? That's something that we can really find out using the right chart. How I built this is pretty simple. I only went to array axis and changed the scale to logarithmic, and that is it. It uses a base of 10 for people who are interested. It does not use a base of 2 for the log. So if you look at it right now, although so the color for Italy is green, right? Although relative to China, the numbers are not rising uh, quickly on the left side, but if you look at the rate of increase of the cases, it started picking up. Uh, just a second. It started picking up somewhere around 20th of Feb, and it really grew faster. So this chart here is showing you how quickly the infection rate was, how big the, or how quickly this infection spread during those times, uh, versus just the count of the total cases which were reported till that day. So with that explanation, what I'll do is I'll let the chart uh, run till till now, and then we will identify a few patterns. So if you look at it, I just paused the chart right now. If you look at what's happening in what happened in US at around April 20th, the cases were really rising, uh, and it looked like they were actually growing exponentially. But if you look at the chart on the right side, the chart is slightly tilting towards the right, the x-axis, and it is not as steep as how it was before 20th April. So what it means is, although of course, like I said earlier, the cases are bound to rise because of the nature of the infection, the way it spreads, but then the rate of the spread is not the same as how it was earlier, because the curve is tilting towards more on the x-axis. What it signifies, for people who want to actually understand it in simple terms, is the rate of spread has definitely started to slow down for all the charts, which you see slightly, plateauing right now. On the flip side, if you look at Russia, it still pretty much maintains a straight line. So although if you look at Russia, the numbers are pretty small right now, uh, the chart clearly suggests that during this period, it was growing spirally or exponentially, and not linearly. So I'll now let it complete till yesterday's date and see what's happening. Right. Uh, I purposely added India so that we can talk about India as to what's happening here as well. You see this almost, the orange dotted line, right? Almost a straight line between this period to this period, uh, which is around what, almost mid of April. But then it has started to uh, plateau or flatten towards the x-axis slightly, which may mean there's a definite slight decrease in the infection rate for now. So what I have done to build these charts is again the same set of controls with animation from format. So format animations, you already see the control on the left side. And then I used pages, right? So I'll quickly show you one of these views so that you get familiarized. So what I've done is on the pages shelf, I've dropped date, this field, and changed it to day of date. So yeah, that is how it has been built. It is pretty much on the same lines of how I built the other one, life expectancy of women versus men, starting 1950 to 2015. So with this, I'm kind of done with what we needed to uh, show you for how to build the Viz animation. I also tried to take this opportunity to explain to you guys as to when and how you should be using uh, exponential or a logarithmic scale on X or Y axis, and how to actually interpret them. So that is it for the Viz animation one. Uh, and we have another session, pretty interesting one, where I need to let you guys know how we can actually plot charts in Python. uh, Lakshya, do we take a break for like 2-3 minutes, or do we just continue with this?
Manish, as you are comfortable.
Okay, all right, so I can probably continue and then finish it in another 20-25 minutes, so let's continue with this. All right. So first things first. I'm not really sure how many of you are actually having some hands-on or any working knowledge of Python. But for people who are not, what I will do is let you know how you can actually get started on Python really quickly without you requiring any installation or any setup, right? So there is a tool named Google Collaboratory, which is provided by Google, and that's what you can use to get started really quickly. So in in the browser, you can go if you have the only prerequisite is you need to have a Gmail ID, and that is it. Uh, so what you need to do is you need to go to this URL, collab.research.google.com, uh, and then just hit enter. So what Google guys have done is they have created an environment for you where you can actually write your Python code, and all of the code that you create, it can be easily linked with either GitHub if you have an account already, or you can actually save all of them in your Google Drive. So it has an integration with Google Drive, or you can actually keep these files locally as well. So you have all of these variety of choices. The good thing is you can just like I said, go to collab.research.google.com and just create a new notebook, and you are good to go. That is it. You do not need any local installation. You do not need anything. So I'll quickly let you know. Here you can actually name your file and just hit save. This is for now, like you see this icon saved in Google Drive, you can also save it locally. What you can do is you can write your Python code in here, and you can just execute this. It is as simple as that. So what Google does is it's a on-cloud solution. So it assigns you you know a machine on the cloud where you can actually run all of your Python code, and you can just keep adding the lines of code uh, and keep running them. That is it. As simple as that. You add more lines of code, and you can actually keep doing that for whatever you want to do. This selects this actually supports multi-line as well. So do not think that you'll need to actually add new snippets of code in every add snippets of code for each line. That is not true. You can actually do multi-line as well. So this is how you actually get yourself set up. And why I'm telling you all of this is because you will need to, we will be sharing the Python notebook, which I've used uh, to showcase the charting options in Python so that you can actually run them for your practice as well. So first things first, I mean, how this idea of how this idea came into being, where we wanted to show you how to chart in Python. So the idea was very simple, and it was definitely not to do any kind of a comparison between the capabilities that Tableau exhibits versus the capabilities that Python exhibit. That was definitely not the idea. Uh, as people, as professionals who belong to the data space, we should be uh, aware of what other tools, what other technologies are available, which lets you do similar stuff. And Python has a very good, very rich library in terms of Matplotlib and Seaborn, uh, which lets you chart really quickly. Uh, I'm not promoting that you should be using Python in this case and not Tableau at all. That's not what the message is. What I'm saying is, once you know, then you know which is easier for your specific needs, right? If you were to do exploratory data analysis, and that's something which you need to do, or maybe want to automate, Python would be one way of doing that. If you really want to do it in Tableau, then all of these needs to be like rebuilt based on how the data set is, and you cannot really automate it there. So that's one flip side. But then there are specific things which Tableau does really beautifully, and then there are specific things which Tableau does beautifully. And once we know both of them, I think what happens is we empower ourselves more as professionals, and that is the whole idea of me doing this session today. So let me get started with this. What we are doing here is importing a few libraries in here. If this is your first session where we are, you're getting a hands-on on Python, then a lot of these may not make sense to you. But then if you have ever programmed in any language, let's say Java, in your academics, or what, then you know that the first things that we need to do in programming language is import the libraries that we want to use. So the two libraries that we are going to use today is Matplotlib. This is a standard library which comes uh, in every package of or every version of Python. And the other one, which is a slightly enriched one, is Seaborn. That's something which comes bundled with some of the Python versions. In others, you need to actually install it separately. And what we are doing is importing both of these libraries. Uh, in addition to this, we are also importing pandas. Pandas is a standard library that lets you manipulate with data tables, which we call as data frames in Python. So how can I execute this line of code? There are two ways. You can either click on this run cell using your mouse, or you can just do Control Enter, and it'll just execute the code. I have already executed this piece of code, so I'm just skipping this for now. What it is doing is it is mounting my Google Drive uh, so that I can read a data file which is saved in my Google Drive. I'm not doing this here in this session with because of the reason that it redirects me to my Google account, generates authorization code, which I'll need to copy and put it here for this line to finish. I've already done that, so that is not a requirement. The other thing is all of these are getting recorded. So I definitely not want my authorization code to be exposed on a public forum. So when you do this, the only thing that you need to do is when you run this line of command, after running, you need to click on this link, go there, generate the authorization code, and then enter in a little text box which will appear here, and you'll get this message mounted at content drive. So what I'm trying to do is I have a file named churnmodeling.csv, which is saved in my Google Drive. And I'm just trying to read that CSV file. The command is very simple, read underscore CSV. And this is available in the pandas library. So what I'll do is execute this line of code now. And that's it. It did not give me any error, which means it succeeded. The next one that I'm going to do is inspect this file and try to figure out what are the contents of the file, right? So the command for that is dot head. Data is my data frame. So data dot head 10 would give me the top 10 records from the file that I have uh, read through using this function read underscore CSV. So if you now look at this data set, it has data from a hypothetical bank, right? The customers of a hypothetical bank, rather. So what it shows you is customer ID for these customers. So one row of record is representing data for one customer. So we have customer ID, the surname for that customer, the credit score for that customer, the geography that customer belongs to, the gender, age, tenure is the total number of years the customer has been a customer to the bank. The balance maintained by the current balance maintained by the customer, number of products that the customer has. So it may be the case that the customer only has a savings account, but then another customer may have a loan as well as a credit card on top of the savings account, right? So the total number of products that customer has uh, is using from the bank. Does have a credit card or not, 1 or 0. These are flags. Is an active member based on recent transactions. Estimated salary, really don't know how a bank would know unless you hold a salary account with the bank where they can actually know how much of a salary you're getting every month. But they have a field, and then exited is an interesting field, right? Which what it means is, uh, did the customer actually continue with the bank, or they close the account and move to some other bank? So the first 10 rows of this record is what we have here. The reason I spoke in length about what this data is, because if we do not understand how the data is structured and what one row of data would mean, there is no way we can do any further analysis or understand any analysis going forward. So let's move forward and try and show what we can do with the libraries that we have in Python to chart some of these, right? So the very basic one, which we have in Tableau as well, is a bar chart, right? And what we have done here is, if you look up, we have named the Seaborn library an alias name as SNS. So what we are doing here is sns.barplot. So what it will do is it will create a bar chart. On the x-axis, it's going to put the gender field. Y-axis, it's going to put the balance field. So we have, if you look at it here, gender, female and male. And then we have balances in here, right? These are going to be dollar amounts. So what we are trying to do here is, and then data is equal to data. This is a parameter where we need to specify which data frame you want to use, from where you want to get the x and y values for gender and balance, right? So since when we read the file, we assigned this into the data frame named data. This is what we are specifying here. So what this is going to do is primarily this is going to show me, if you could guess it correctly, who or which gender mint has a bigger uh, balance in terms of dollar amount, male or female. So let's just plot it out and see as to what the chart shows us. So like you said, male appears to have slightly bigger bar compared to female. What it means is really simple for us to interpret, right? So I'm not going to go into that. If you look at it, it has already assigned a color, which we never specified. We can change the color as well by specifying a few parameters, which you can look at by just clicking on, uh, clicking inside the function and uh, pressing a comma. So you can specify these colors. By default, the color option says color is equal to none. So it just picks a color of its own, which is fine for now. We do not have a lot of bars in here, so we do not want to actually specify this parameter in here. So simple. Some of in if we were to interpret as to how we would do this in Tableau, then we would need to put gender into the column shelf and then sum of balances into rows and convert the chart type to a bar, and that is what it would represent there as well. Moving on, trying to get into a few more examples for bar plot. So what I'm now trying to do is I'm just trying to figure out which geography has more balances rather than gender. So on x-axis, we have specified geography, y, we still hold balances there. So let's see what happens. So now there is a marked difference, right? German seems to be having more bank balances with this bank, the hypothetical bank that we were looking at, and Spain and France seems to be pretty much head to head in terms of balances. Yeah. Uh, Moving on, there is a slight variation to this chart, right? If you look at these parameters, I mean, this is still a bar chart, but then if you look at these parameters in here, on the x-axis, we again have geography, y-axis, we still have the balance. So far, it is the same as the bar on the top. But if you look at the last parameter, hue is equal to gender, then what we are trying to do is we are trying to break this chart further on gender. So we want to know for all of these geographies how the different genders have been maintaining their balances. So what it means is, if you were to try and recall what happens in Tableau when you put your gender in color, then it separates the bar into two colors, each one for each gender. Uh, and that is what is happening right now. Uh, it broke down the geography into genders, and this is how it is. I mean, gender-wise, still the same trend, because that's a worldwide trend based on the first chart that we built, right? Pretty much head-to-head, male seems to be having slightly more balances than female, but very, very minuscule. And then the same trend is observed here as well. So what we are doing here is we are actually using this fourth parameter, hue is equal to the field name, to actually break this down further. You can think of this as a stack bar chart. It's just that the bars are the male and female components of for any geography. They are not showing on top of each other rather than on side of each other. So in Tableau, if you would have done this, then you would have probably put two fields in column. One is geography, and then the other one is gender. On the row shelf, you'd have sum of balances. So pretty simple, pretty easy commands. Now let's look into some other chart types. The first one is Scatterplot. So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to figure out, do people tend to have more balances as they age, or or what is the trend, right? Do younger people have more tendencies to have more balances, or do elder people have tendencies to have more balances, right? If that's the kind of analysis we want to do, what we need to do is put them on a scatter plot. So our x-axis is age here, and y-axis is going to be balance, and let's see what it does. So this is what it is. It shows you a scatter plot. Like I said, on the x-axis there is age, y-axis we have balances. But if you really want to try and figure out if there is a trend, uh, um, you know, we all are going to struggle because looks like there is no trend as such. If you look at these lower age numbers and move up on the y-axis, you'll see you will have smaller values for balance, as well as bigger values for balance as well. Same ways, if you look slightly up on the age scale, which is around 70, you also have smaller values for balance as well as bigger values for balance, right? So there is no trend as such. So what we can do is we can further break this down into maybe gender by including this field here, hue is equal to gender, and see if there's a pattern uh, that we can identify. And let's do that. Um, and what it has essentially done now is, if you look at these two charts, it is kind of the same as you putting gender on the color shelf and color marks card rather, and trying to figure out if there is a pattern between male and female uh, bank balances based on their age. And again, if you look at it right now, it's pretty much uh, looks like these are all pretty well mixed up. All of these colors, we really do not have any pattern that we can actually identify across the age scale on the x-axis. So, which may mean that all the age groups are actually saving similar amounts of money and having them in their bank in their banks as outstanding balances. So that is what we can do with Scatterplot. If you look at the function itself, these are pretty self-explanatory. For bar plot, we had bar plot. For Scatterplot, we have Scatterplot. So moving on to the next one, we have LM plot, right? It means line plot, but then this chart is pretty interesting because it lets you do a few fancy stuff without you having to write much code. So what I'm trying to do here is, and this is going to be almost the same as a scatter plot, let me tell you that, right? So what I'm trying to do is, again, I'm taking the same fields like it took earlier, age and balance. So on the x-axis, I have age, and on the y-axis, I have balance, right? Uh, and then I have hue as gender as well. But then there is this additional field, option or parameter rather, that I have set as false, and that's something which is I'm going to explain you now. So if you look at this chart, let me just remove this. This is going to be not much different than the chart on the top. Uh, and you will not be able to identify much patterns in here. So what I've tried to do is I have tried to limit the data to just top 50 rows and limit the data so that we can actually make sense of uh, the dots in some manner. And what I've done is I've only selected the top 50 rows by putting in data dot head 50, similar command that we used earlier to show the top 10 records. So now what it is trying to do is, again, show me for the top 50, the first 50 rather, the first 50 records, how are their balances placed, right? But then it still looks like uh, Scatterplot, like a simple scatterplot, and does not let me figure out the pattern myself. Uh, but if you actually uh, change this parameter value, which is fit underscore reg is equal to false to fit underscore reg is equal to true, then this is where uh, this gets interesting. If you look at the dots on the chart, this is going to be pretty much the same as how it is on the chart on top. But then we have some shaded areas, blue and shades of orange. And then we have lines cutting through these shaded areas. Now, what are these? If you've heard of this word or this term named regression, which is one of the very basic machine learning principles or tools that we do to estimate numbers, then this line actually represents the equation to that model. If I were to simply explain you as to how to interpret this, what it means is uh, this is the best fit line. This is the best fit regression line, which represents the change in the data, right? So how is my data changing? On the x-axis, my age is increasing, and on the y-axis, if we go up, my balances are increasing, right? So if you look at this orange line, what it suggests is it's for male, right? So what it suggests is as the age is increasing, male have a tendency of having more balances. Uh, on the flip side, if you look at this line on the blue line, as the age is increasing, there's a decrease in the balances. Although the slope of the line is not very steep, so there's a decrease, but not by much. If you look at the slope of the orange line, then it is slightly more steeper on the opposite direction than the line, the blue line, right? So basically, you can do quick regression analysis as well using this parameter and then the LM plot. The full name is line plot, and you can use this parameter to do quick regression analysis. Um, there is also another chart type to do regression plot, and that's something that you can do as well. Let me show you how to make this work. Yeah, so if you look at this chart here, and then the chart on the top, uh, there is no much difference except for the fact that on the top chart we have used hue, so we have gender demarcated, as well as when you look at the regression plot, it has two lines, one for each gender. That's something which is how which is distinct between these two charts. But let's say if I remove this option of hue here in the LM plot, then what happens? I'm assuming that both of these charts will be almost the same, and this is what is happening. If you look at the chart on the top and then the chart on the bottom, they are exactly the same, showing you regression plot for the first 100 records. But then the beauty of LM plot is where you can actually add in this extra parameter for hue and actually make it more informative, as well as make it look much nicer as well. So you can do quick regression analysis here using LM plot. And that is one of the reasons probably LM plot is preferred more than regplot, which is also used for regression. So moving on, there is one chart type which is very interesting. Now this is something which is supported in Seaborn only. This is not available anywhere else. Like this chart type is not available anywhere else in any of these other libraries. So wow, pretty interesting, right? What I am trying to do on the x-axis, if you see, I'm trying to do a violin plot, and on the x-axis I have gender. So I have two violin looking like charts, one for female, one for male, and on the y-axis we have balances, right? So we are pretty much using the same fields, and our data frame is named data, so data is equal to data, right? If you look at this chart type, I mean, it is a mix of two charts actually. If you have used a box plot, then if you look at uh, what is appearing inside the violin is a box plot only. It's nothing else, nothing other than a box plot. So this black bar, this shows the IQR, the 25, the second quartile, and then the third quartile. This little dot here is the median number, and then this is max, and then somewhere down below you'll have min as well. And the same is being plotted for the other category as well. So inside what you see, inside of violin, what you see is a box plot. But then what are these contours, right? Now these contours are nothing, but if you look at this very closely, uh, this is a histogram, but then this is not facing upwards. This is facing towards the right and towards the left. And if you look at both of these sides, they are like mirror images of each other. So what essentially it means is, if I were to put in my mouse here, then it means that whatever the magnitude of this line is from this black bar here till here is the number of people who are maintaining a balance of 100,000. That's it. Uh, and if you were to quickly interpret a few things, what it also suggests is that most of the people are having a balances of around 125k, because because this this contour is steepest at this point at around 125k. And since we have already seen that there is no much, on a holistic view, there is no much difference between the balances of male and female. Both of these violins appear pretty much the same for us. So there's no fun in looking at these, right? So what we can do is try to find out if violins could be different for another category, and that's what I try to do here when I was looking at geography as well as balance, and figure out what's the violin plot pattern there. So if you look at France and Spain, their violins look almost the same. But if you look at Germany, then you have a different shape altogether. Now let me go back and actually show you why it's like this, right? We have already seen some similar pattern earlier as well, right? Germans had a tendency of having more bank balances in this bank, hypothetically, and France and Spain had almost similar balances on a net basis for the country. And this is what is showing up here as well. If you look at uh, the wing, if I may say so, of the violin for France and Spain, there are a lot of customers who are having balances of 0, and that is why it has a a wing, or a fin rather, uh, towards its tail. But then there is no such structure in here, which means uh, Germans do not have uh, a 0 balances. The minimum balances that they have is around 15,000k uh, in this bank. And if you look at here, what appears to be the case is uh, that almost all of these three regions have the same amount of you know uh, so maximum people from all of these regions have uh, you know uh, balances in the range of 125k, because this violin plot is the widest at this location. If you project it on the scale, it will turn out to be 125k. Same is true for Germany as well. All right. Talking about histogram, right? So, what a violin plot is, in a sense, it's a mix of two charts. The inside of it is a box plot, then the outside of it is histogram, uh, turned by 90 degrees, facing on the right side and the left side, and both of these sides are mirror images of each other. Talking about histograms, how do we draw histograms all by ourselves, this is going to be very simple. The command or the function for that is distribution plot. They call it distribution plot in Seaborn. So you can just specify a field, and then you can get started with this. Now this chart is something which looks really beautiful, because not just it shows you the bins, the auto calculated bins, but then it also shows you a smoothened line which shows you the skewness in the data. So if you look at this, you can really maybe not looking at the bars, but then looking at the line, the smoothened line, you can definitely conclude that it has some kind of right skewness on age, which means more younger people are, more number of people who are customers to this bank are younger than the older generation. So yeah, so this is what gets clearly visible when you look at this distribution plot. We can also look at this distribution plot with some other data items. The next one that I try to do is balances, and let's see what happens. And this is very interesting, right? Uh, Not something that we have not seen earlier. We have already identified these patterns in our other plots as well, right? So what it suggests is the majority of the people are having uh, zero balances in this bank. Now, are there other charts which hinted us at this? Let's figure out. If you look at these fins, these are broader. These are broadest actually, even broader than what we have here, right? Uh, Here, right? Which means there are more number of people having zero bank balances for this geography, Spain and France, than people having 125K balances. And did you notice it here as well in the scatter plot? There are a lot of uh, zeros on the y scale, even on this x-axis, where we have age increasing, right? These are all suggesting that all of these are zero bank balances for many people, and these are just top 100 records, right? We are just doing this for top 100, the first 100 records, right? And we still have a lot of zero bank balances in there. This is what the histogram is suggesting here as well. Lots of zeros, and if you just leave this part or ignore this part, then the rest of the curve is pretty much like a bell curve, like a normal distribution. So we can identify these patterns really quickly. Let's quickly look at what happens to our credit score histogram, right? So that's what I've tried to do here. When you look at the histogram for credit score, this is also pretty much a normal distribution, like a bell curve. One thing which is to note here is, and this is something which is like a standard concept. Wherever you see steep lines, either to the left side or to the right side, you know, a bell should ring in your head that something is wrong. Uh, Either that the nature of the data is such that there is a pattern that you need to take a note of, or maybe there are some unit issues, currency issues, or issues in capturing the data. So what is likely to happen here in this case is there are a lot of people who are having a credit score of this maximum value. I can't really figure out what this maximum value is, but then I'm assuming this to be 850. But if you explore more, what is actually true is you cannot have a credit score of more than 850, which means if you have a credit score of more than 850, then it is capped at 850. And that is what explains um the length of this bar. So now that we know of what is the maximum value, chances are that if that was not the case, then it would have been broken down into smaller bars, leading to 900,000 hypothetically, maybe 1200. I really don't know. But then all of these are kind of getting accumulated in 850, and that is why the length of this bar is so high. So that is with distribution plot. One other thing that you can do with distribution plot is really make it look like a step, and I'll explain that to you in a while. First, show you how it appears. So instead of showing the bars of the bin as bars, what we can show is only show the outlines of them. So that is it appears as step. And if you can look at it, what is not appearing here is the bar itself, just the outlines of the bar, the top outlines of the bar. How do we do this? We need to add as additional parameter hist kws, and here we need to specify hist type or histogram type as step. We need to specify the line width. So if you change this, then the lines will be much thicker. A 5 will be even thicker than a 3. And alpha is equal to 1. It's a parameter to control uh, the intensity of the color. So how faded or how dark the color would appear. So, I mean, you can play around with these settings. These are not really difficult to deal with. The only thing which is important here is if you really want your histogram to appear as a step chart, then you can add this parameter his type is equal to step in here, and that is what it is. Uh, okay, all right. So we're pretty much towards the end of it. Two more chart types remaining. I hope you guys have been enjoying the session so far and learning a lot. The next one is I'll show you we call it a heat map, right? And this is something which people who have already worked on Tableau would know what a heat map is, right? So I'll first show you how it appears, and then I'll explain you as to what the command looks like. So what I've tried to do is show a heat map between balance, and now I've picked a new field, which is tenure. So tenure is the number of years a customer has been with the bank, and balance is their current bank balance. So what it shows, what I'm trying to show is there a relationship between tenure and balance, right? Are people who are, uh, having, are people who are with the bank for longer duration, do they have the tendency of saving more or having more balances, or what is the trend there? So uh, the function that we have to use here is, of course, sns.heatmap. That is pretty explanatory, and we need to specify what is the data that we want to plot, and then we can specify uh, color map, RDBU. It sounds very complicated, but then this is short form for red and blue, RD red, BU blue, and you can change your parameters. So it is changing between shades of red and blue. If you look at the scale on the right, uh, right, so red is 0, and then the minimum value is red, and then the maximum value is shade of blue, and then the colors are changing based on the magnitude of the values. We can change this to whatever set of two colors. What is important to note here is we need to actually transform the data using this pivot table uh, function to be able to do this. And this is a prerequisite, right? And this is where we actually specify all of these parameters. So if you look at heat map function, we have not specified which column you want or which field you want on the x-axis, which field you want on the y-axis. That's not something which is happening here, which is pretty contrasting to the other chart types where we specifically specify uh, our two fields, right? So distribution plot is one field, but when you look at violin plot, we specify what goes in the x-axis, what goes into the y-axis. Same goes for LM chart as well. We specify what goes into the x-axis, what goes into the y-axis. But in case of the heat map, what you see is we do not have these parameters specified here. Instead, we are just passing a data frame, a pandas data frame, and this is being created using a pivot table function, where we are taking the first 100 records from the data set and specifying the values to be balance and index to be tenure. So index is nothing but the x-axis. Values is what appears on the, no, wait, values is what appears as the colors, and columns is what appears in the x-axis. So columns is x-axis, Uh, Tenure, which is index, is nothing but the y-axis, and balance, which is values, is the magnitude, the relative magnitude of these boxes in terms of colors. So that is how you actually plot a heat map. This is slightly a 2 or a 3-step process rather than a 1-step process for the other chart types. So this is an additional step. You need to actually create a pivot table using these parameters. One thing that you can actually also do is you can actually increase or decrease the uh, size of the chart to your liking. So what I've done is done a 30 uh, width and 3 units of height. What you can also do is you can do 20 and 5. So I'm reducing the width and increasing the length, and you can suit yourself based on what fits your need. You can also save the image by just right clicking on it and saving it to your file location. This is as simple. Uh, this is something which is true for any chart by the way. You can just right click and then save. The last one, and this is a very interesting one, is a variant of Scatterplot, but then it lets you do multiple scatterplots at once. And the name of the plot or the function itself is pair plot. So what it does is it takes multiple fields as input. So what I've done is credit score, tenure, and balances. These are the fields that I've specified. And what the pair plot is going to do is it is going to actually show you the relationship between all of these 3 fields with each other, taken 2 at a time. So how does credit score look like when uh, when what is the relationship between credit score and tenure? Then what is the relationship between credit score and balance? Then tenure and balance, and likewise. So let me just plot it, and it will become clear to you. You can specify, you can even increase it to 10 number of fields, right? So if you look at the chart below, uh, you have a credit score in the first row and credit score in the first column. So if you look at this chart, this is credit score versus credit score. So, if you move diagonally, all of these are going to be so the same fields, right? So tenure versus tenure and balances versus balances. So always in a pair plot, if you look at it, diagonally going down from top left, you will always have a histogram, because you cannot plot a scatter plot using 2 fields which are same. When you do that, then you will have, you cannot really plot it, right? You'll have overlapping dots maybe. So it will not make any sense. So what Tableau does is in a pair plot, diagonally from top left to top right, it plots a histogram. But the interesting part is where the scatter plots are plotted right now. So when you look at this first row and second column, what is being plotted here is credit score versus tenure. So how does my credit score versus tenure scatter plot look like? This is an answer to that. And then the third one, third column, in the third column, we have credit score plotted against balances. So how pair plot is beneficial for us is we can actually create multiple scatter plots, and we can do a n cross n type of a comparison using a pair plot. If you have multiple factors or multiple fields and you really do not know how they correlate to each other, and you really need to do a brute force analysis where you need to compare each field with each other field in the data table, then what you really need is a pair plot and not commands like these where you actually plot one uh, scatter plot each at a time. So if you do these, then primarily you'll need to do all of these permutations and combinations across all of these fields together for yourself, and then you will also need to write all of these commands yourself, that too manually, one at a time each. So that's not something which is required in this case. What we can do is we can quickly do a brute force Scatterplot, that's the way how I like to term it, but then the name of the function is pair plot. There is some duplication in here. I'm not sure if you already noticed, but then if you look at this chart, this is credit score versus tenure. And if you look at this chart, this is tenure against credit score. So it's essentially, if you look at this chart and this chart, they should be the same. And they are actually the same. It's just that their axes are flipped. So if you take this chart and rotate it anti-clockwise, I'm just repeating, if you take this chart and rotate it anti-clockwise by 90 degrees, you should be able to envision this chart. I'm not sure if you're able to do that mentally right now, but then that is what it is. If you rotate this, flip it by 90 degrees, uh, anti-clockwise, you get this. Same ways, this chart, tenure versus balance, would be the same as balance versus tenure. And again, the same story. If you flip this one uh, or rotate this one 90 degrees anti-clockwise, you get this chart type. So, and with that, I'm pretty much done with what I needed to cover for today. I really enjoyed taking you guys to this session, which almost lasted like 90 minutes. So thank you for paying attention. What we will now do is move to maybe take a little break and then move to the next session. I'm going to hand it over to Lakshya now. And in the meantime, I'll look at some of these questions that you guys may have raised. If there are any unanswered ones, I will probably answer them now.
Thanks, Manish. It was a great session. We can take a short 4-5 minutes break. So exactly at 1:30, Sarah can proceed with her session. So what Sarah would be covering is what are the best practices for certifications in Tableau. So let's wait for 1:30 p.m. and then Sarah can start with the session. Okay, now let's start with the next session. So we have Sarah from London. So she's currently leading the London TUG group. So now handing over to Sarah.
Hi everyone, let me just share my screen. Akshay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
All right, thank you. So, hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the certifications that you can get in Tableau. Focusing on Tableau Desktop. I'm not going to touch on the 2 certifications you can get on the server. So, just a quick intro from me. So, my name is Sarah Bartlett. I work as a consultant at Slalom, based in London. I'm a Tableau Zen Master for 2020. I'm also a Tableau Social Ambassador. And as Lakshay mentioned, I'm a co-leader of the London Tableau User Group. If you want to reach out to me, I've got some contact details on the screen there, and I'll also share those at the end as well. Just a bit of background on me. So this is a few of my visualizations from Tableau Public. I have about 150 visualizations on there. I've been using it for probably about 4 years. These are some of my more famous visualizations you might be familiar with, but I see that Tableau Public is really great, and it's a really great place for me to practice and actually share my work. In terms of my background, I've been working in analytics for about 12 years in various different roles. I started as an economist, so I studied economics at university and worked as a macroeconomist for a year, and then moved into more data analytics. I've been using Tableau for the last 6 years, so I was introduced to that when I was working as a senior MI analyst. At the time, I didn't know what Tableau was, and I got sent on a 2-day Tableau training course. And then I fell in love with the tool and have been learning it ever since. I've been consulting using Tableau for the last 3 years. The last 2 of those have been spent at Slalom. And then, so in my role, like day to day, I'm working with different clients and helping them overcome different issues with Tableau, building dashboards, just giving general advice around how to set up things like a center of excellence and things like that. Now, I actually didn't get my Tableau Certified Associate certification until 2018, despite using Tableau for many years before that. And that was because a couple of reasons. My previous employers didn't want to pay for the exam, so I requested for the exam many times, but my employer wasn't willing to pay. And also I was quite nervous about taking the exam. So while I could have paid, out of my own pocket, I was quite nervous that I wouldn't pass and I'd have to pay again. So that's why I put off taking the exam so long. And I do regret that decision. I do wish I'd taken the Certified Associate exam sooner. Now I passed that in 2018, as I said, and then I took the Certified Professional exam last year. And the 2 exams are very different, and they require you to study in a slightly different way. And I'm going to go through that in my presentation, but I'm extremely proud to have that Certified Professional certification now. And more recently, I've also been working through the Tableau e-learning platform, which I'm going to introduce to you. And so far, I've achieved 11 of the 13 badges that you can get on there. The only 2 I have remaining are the Tableau server-based ones. So I've got all the desktop and kind of the blueprint ones. And that's quite a fun way to learn. Now, you may be wondering, why should I bother getting certified? What's in it for me? So just a few benefits that I can see, and I can see that other people have achieved as well. I would say that certification is a really great way to help you prove your Tableau and data visualization skills. So particularly with the professional exam, it will require you to have a good understanding of data visualization and best practices. And so you can, those are transferable skills, so you can use those in other things like Python, as we've just seen, or Power BI. It's not just Tableau. If you have that certification, you can put it on your CV, and it will really help you actually quantify that you actually know Tableau. So perhaps you're applying for a new job and Tableau skills are a requirement. If you actually have a certification, you can prove that you actually know what you're talking about. It can be quite difficult sometimes, say if you don't have a Tableau public profile, you don't have any certification, there's no real way of you proving that you know how to use Tableau other than perhaps sitting a test as part of a recruitment process. So having those certifications on your profile is really, really useful. And it will also help you stand out from the crowd, because there'll be people out there that don't have the certifications. So if you do, then you've already got a benefit above those. I found that the certifications were really good for helping me to test my knowledge and actually fill in the gaps. So as I said before, I learned Tableau by attending a 2-day training course. And that's the only formal Tableau training that I've ever had. The rest of my training has been like self-taught. I've done a lot of practice, like practice upon practice, hundreds of hours, I'm sure, just building visualizations and publishing them to Tableau Public. I've also read a lot of blogs. I go on the Tableau forums and try and answer questions. I read a lot of data visualization books, and then just generally engage in the community. But I found that when I was revising for my exams, I realized I had a few gaps in my knowledge where there was just some functionality that I'd never used. I'd never had a reason to use it in my day-to-day role. So it meant I had to actually go and learn those things before I sat the exam. So for me, it was really good to actually help me get a more thorough knowledge of the Tableau platform. And then finally, one other benefit is you actually get to earn badges and you get to win swag. So if for every exam that you take, you get a badge in your acclaim profile. So your acclaim profile is where all of your certifications sit, primarily for Tableau, but other companies use the same platform as well. And that also applies to the e-learning. So your badges will go onto your acclaim profile, and then from there you can easily share them to LinkedIn and other social media platforms. And then if you're certified in both, if you both have both the certified associate and certified professional certificates, you can actually request a t-shirt from Tableau, and sometimes they have badges as well, and there's some fun competitions sometimes, so that's always a nice benefit. And you know, you can actually show you have the certification with a t-shirt. So before I continue, I've touched on this a few times, and I'm going to keep referring back to it during my talk, but the Tableau e-learning platform is currently free for 90 days. So if you sign up now or before the 30th of June, you will receive the platform free for 90 days from that date. Now, this e-learning platform is usually around $60 to $120 per year, depending on which role profile you sign up with. It's completely focused on and aligned to the Tableau blueprint functionality. So you go in there and you can actually pick a learning path that's applicable to you and the job that you do. So perhaps you're an author, so you build Tableau vizzes, or you could be a consumer of vizzes, so you don't actually build any yourself, but you consume visualizations that other people produce. Or perhaps you're an executive sponsor, so you don't actually build anything in Tableau, but you're an advocate of Tableau, and perhaps you have a team that build reports for you. Or maybe you're just focused on server and you're a site admin. For any of those paths, and there's more than that, there's 13 altogether, there's a actual learning path dedicated to you, and it will tell you the things that are useful for you to learn. So those paths come with various different learning journeys. And at the end of each one, there'll be a skills assessment. And if you pass that assessment, you earn a badge. As I said before, that goes onto your acclaim profile, and you can share that on social media. Now, the skills assessments are really great practice for the actual proper certifications that we're going to talk about in a second. So I'd highly recommend that you sign up to this platform and start learning, even if you've already got your certifications. Like I've been working through the e-learning for the last couple of weeks. And I've really enjoyed some of the platforms. I've learned a lot, and there's some things that I hadn't done before that I've managed to learn through the e-learning platform. And the skills assessments are great because they're like mini exams, but they're not timed, and you can take them as many times as you like. So if you took the exam on the first occasion and you failed, it doesn't matter. You can go back and take it again until you pass. And it's only once you've passed that assessment then you earn the badge as well. So it will help you show that where your gaps in your knowledge are, and you can go back to the training again and revisit anything that you may have missed. So in terms of the Tableau desktop certifications, there's actually 3 certifications that you can take. There's the specialist, the certified associate, and the certified professional. So the specialist exam is kind of the lowest level. It's the newest exam of the 3, so it came out after the other 2. It's the 1-hour exam. It's made up of 30 multiple choice questions. It currently costs $100, but it's actually currently discounted by 50%. So you can currently buy this exam for just $50, and it's valid forever. So as long as you live, you have this exam and you have it on your profile. If I go into the other, I'm going to touch on the others in more detail later, but just a quick overview. The certified associate is 2 hours and the certified professional is 3 hours. Similar to the specialist, the certified associate is actually 36 multiple choice questions. It costs a little bit more and it's valid for 2 years. And the certified professional is completely hands-on, so there's no multiple choice questions. It's all using Tableau and building visualizations. It costs $600 and it's valid for 3 years, so they're valid for the longest of the few, apart from the specialist. So if we focus in on the specialist exam, there's no prerequisites for this exam, so you don't need to have completed any specific training before taking it. Tableau suggests that you should have been using the product for 3 months before taking this exam. It's made up of 22 theoretical questions and 8 hands-on questions. And I'm going to go through some examples of those in a second, but the theoretical questions will ask you something about Tableau and give you 4 or 5 multiple choice answers that you can pick from. And for the hands-on questions, you actually need to use Tableau to find the question, find the answer. So while you won't submit your workbooks as part of the exam, you need to use Tableau to actually get to that answer. Now, Tableau aim this exam at people who have a foundational skills and understanding of Tableau desktop, but perhaps, you know, you're not an expert user yet. You're just getting your grip of things and getting your head around the product. Now, just as an example theory question, I've got one here taken out of the exam guide. So, which of the following can you use to create a calculated field that returns data independent of the data granularity in the view? And I've got the 4 options down there. So we've got an include level of detail calculation, a table calculation, a basic calculation, and a fixed LOD calculation. I'll give you a few seconds to have a think about the answer. Okay, let's move on now. So the answer for that question is a fixed LOD calculation. And that's just an example of the kind of questions you may get. So if you struggled with that, I'd suggest you go and have a look at the exam guide, have a look at the other questions that are there, and you know, then do some revision on and fill in the gaps of your knowledge. And an example hands-on question like this one here, it actually asks you to look at some sample data, create a chart, and then it asks you based on that chart to actually interpret the chart and determine which months saw the least fluctuation in increase and decrease of this value. So that, like I said before, requires you to actually use Tableau, get hands-on, but your workbooks aren't submitted to Tableau. So there's no focus on kind of like how well your workbook's formatted or anything like that. You're just purely using Tableau just to get to an answer. And then at the end of the exam, that's all thrown away. Now, Tableau say that if you want to sit this exam, they suggest that you complete the Desktop 1 e-learning course. So the Desktop 1 e-learning course is available on the e-learning platform, which is currently free. And it's suggested that you can complete this in 10 hours. It covers the fundamentals of Tableau. So I've listed everything that it covers on the screen there, but it's primarily just getting to grips with the product, knowing how to connect to data, knowing how to organize your data, so group fields, perform hierarchies, knowing how to sort and filter your data, knowing how to build visualizations, so actually use the Tableau interface to build dashboards, knowing how to build essential chart types, so things like bar charts, line charts, pie graphs, stack bars, things like that. Knowing how to create basic calculations, so that will be things like string calculations, arithmetic calculations, and quick table calculations. And also understanding how to build interactive dashboards. So knowing not only how to build a dashboard, but how to make them interactive and how to build them in such a way that they reveal data stories and insights. So if you complete the study guide on the e-learning, they suggest it would take 10 hours, but I would say that that alone isn't going to give you the knowledge that you need to complete the exam. As with any of these exams, you really need to get hands-on practice. So the e-learning modules don't actually give you any hands-on practice in Tableau. A lot of the learning is theoretical. You may watch some videos of somebody using Tableau, but you don't actually get to use Tableau yourself. So I would say definitely take the e-learning course, but then supplement that with your own learning. So learn a module. So let's say learn how to sort and filter the data, and then go and perform that yourself on your own data set so you can practice. There's a couple of tips from the community. Now, I've taken these from the community because I actually haven't sat this exam myself. This exam came out after I sat my certified associate. So here's some tips that I've gathered, and I've spoken to a lot of people that have taken this exam. So this is kind of the advice that I've heard. But as I said before, as with any of these exams, you're going to hear me say this a lot, practice using Tableau. So you really need to get into the product and know how it works. There's a lady called Christine Reitman who lives in Germany. She's a student, and she actually took this exam. And before she took the exam, she documented her study progress over about 10 blog posts. So for each week, she focused on different subject areas, and then she blogged about her learning and her progression. You can read that entire blog series at this link that I'm sharing on the screen now. And I'll share this deck at the end so you can take any links out as well. But I highly recommend kind of looking at the approach that she took, and how she broke down her study and how she tackled different areas. And she also gives you kind of her experience of the exam at the end, so you can take some tips away from that too. As with any of these exams, I highly recommend you read the study guide that Tableau provide. This will give you an idea of how the exam's structured, and also gives you some practice questions so that will mimic the kind of questions you'll get in the exam. So they're really, really helpful. I know for any of the exams I've taken, the study guides have been really invaluable in terms of me getting my head around how the questions will be presented and what Tableau are looking for. You can get the study guides, and in those are the practice questions from the Tableau website. They're quite easy to find. Okay, so moving on, we're going to focus on the Certified Associate exam now. So that exam lasts 2 hours. It's 36 multiple choice questions, and it's valid for 2 years. Again, there's no prerequisites for this exam, so you don't need to complete the specialist exam before you take this exam. You can if you wish, but there's no requirement to do so. Tableau say that before you attempt this exam, you should have been using Tableau Desktop for 5 months. And by that, they mean using Tableau Desktop hands-on, not just consuming reports other people have built. You really need to be building dashboards yourself. With this exam, there's a focus on accuracy rather than journey. And by that, I mean they're more interested in you getting to the right answer than how you got there. So similar to the certified exam, the specialist exam, you don't have to submit your workbooks as part of this exam. It's completely multiple choice. You'll use Tableau just to help you get to answers. So there will be hands-on questions, but Tableau won't see the workbook that you use to get to the answers for those questions. So as long as you're getting to the right answer, it's kind of irrelevant how you're getting there. I mean, obviously, it'll be better if you get there efficiently because it will take you less time, but as long as you get the right answer, Tableau don't mind. And they say that this exam is targeted at those who have a comprehensive understanding of the functionality in Tableau Desktop. So in those 5 months that you've been working with the tool, you really need to be getting hands-on, delving deep into the different subject areas. And I would say this exam is very thorough, so you need to be using lots of different elements of the tool. And that's where I found that when I took this exam, I'd been using Tableau for about 4 years, but there was parts of the tool that I'd never really used. I'd never had a requirement to do so. So I found that I had a lot of gaps in my knowledge when I started studying for this exam. Now, in terms of the topic weightings, Tableau actually document this in their study guide, and I've listed them all here so you can get a feel for the kind of things that they'll be testing you on and the weighting for each. So calculations and data connections carry the highest weight. So with data connections, you need to understand how to connect to different data sources, whether that be on cloud data sources or Excel data sources, for instance. And you also need to understand how to perform joins, blends, and unions. So again, that's part of the data connection piece. And with calculations, it's important that you understand how to perform both aggregated calculations and like calculations that you perform in the calculated field window, but also table calculations and how they work. You may have some hands-on questions that require you to perform a table calculation, for instance, to get to the right answer. So it's important that you understand how those work. You also need to understand when to use which calculation. So they may give you a theoretical question and ask you what kind of calculation is the best to use to get to the answer. So you need to understand, for instance, when you may use just a regular like sum calculation over a Tableau like level of detail calculation. And then as well, it covers all the other things you'll probably be more familiar with. So like organizing your data, chart types, mapping, analytics, and then obviously dashboards. Tableau suggests that you complete first the Tableau Desktop 1 learning course, which is the foundational one that I mentioned before that you would cover if you were sitting the specialist exam. They also recommend you complete the Desktop 2 e-learning course, which is the next step on from the fundamentals Desktop 1. This one is the class as the intermediate training. Suggested study time is 10 hours. And it covers all the intermediate desktop features, including advanced charts and more complex calculations. I'd highly suggest that you read the Visual Analytics Best Practice guidebook. It's a white paper that you can get from the Tableau website, and it tells you, the best ways of displaying data and just visualizing data effectively. And that really gives you a sense of kind of how Tableau are going to expect you to work with data, and it will really help reading this white paper anyway, even if you don't want to sit a certification, but it's particularly helpful for both this exam and for the professional exam as well. Now, in terms of the tips that I think that you should know and things that I found beneficial, as I said before, read the exam study guide and attempt the practice questions in the study guide. Now, the only drawback of this is that there's not many practice questions in the study guide, and I think it's about 5 or 6, and you'll quickly, work through those. So one resource that I found incredibly helpful was learningtableau.com. So learningtableau.com offers free practice quizzes for both the associate exam and the specialist exam. And like I said before, they're completely free, but they also offer practice papers for a small fee. So I think I paid about £7, so that's probably about $10, a little bit less, and access some practice papers. And so you can actually sit them. It's just like completing the real exam. And then you get the answers at the end, and you also get the kind of solution work through, so you can understand how to get to the right answer. I found these really invaluable because it helped me practice lots and practice the right kind of things that I should have been practicing for the exam, and also identify where I had knowledge gaps, so then I could go back to my study and actually focus in on those areas that I was struggling in. In terms of the areas I found particularly useful to focus on, and things that kept coming up in my practice papers, were trend lines, p-squared, and r values. So actually understanding how these work. This was something I hadn't really used much of before, but you need to be able to explain r-squared, so p-squared and r values and what they mean, and also perform different types of trend lines. You need to be confident in explaining box plots, so explaining what the middle section means, what the outliers mean, why the whiskers stop at a certain point, things like that. You may be asked a question around that. And you need to be able to explain a scenario when you might need to use a level of detail calculation. So it's important that you understand the different types of LOD calculations, so fix, include, or exclude, and when you might use one over the other. And also scenarios where you don't need an LOD. Maybe there's scenarios like that, so you need to understand which calculation is right. And when actually taking the exam, I found it was helpful when answering the hands-on questions to actually break the questions down into steps. So sometimes the questions will be worded in such a way they'll say, in 2012, and then there'll be another kind of paragraph. If they're only asking you to look at a particular year, then it's best to just filter for the year first and then perform the visualization or the calculation, because at least then you're narrowing your data down to that year that's in question. I found that helpful when I was working through the exam. And then finally, moving on to the certified professional exam. This is the longest of the 3. It's 3 hours. It's quite a long exam and it's very intense. It's practical, it's hands-on, there's no multiple choice questions. It costs the most, it costs $600, but it's valid for 3 years. Now, there is a prerequisite for this exam, so you can't take this exam unless you've passed the associate certification, and that certification needs to be in date. So if it's expired, you'll need to take the I can't even talk, the associate certification again before you take this exam. They say that you should have been using Tableau for 12 months or more before taking this exam. And with this exam, the focus is on visual best practices, technical skills, and storytelling. Now, there's a big focus on visual best practices and storytelling in particular. So you really need to understand how to work with data and visualize data effectively and actually tell a story with your data. As I said before, the exam is 100% hands-on. You may be faced with some short questions. So maybe there may be a question that asks you to visualize something better. So you'll be presented with a visualization and you're asked to improve it and maybe focus in on a certain point. And then there's some much longer scenario-based questions. So in my exam, I was given a scenario about taxis in New York and then asked a lot of questions around that. So it was almost like a business scenario. So I was like a manager in New York and I wanted to know about taxis, and then all the questions were based around that. So I had to look at things like where the most popular pickups were and I visualized that effectively, times, so there was mapping and also like revenue and things like that. So you'll work on that scenario, so you'll keep coming back to the same data set and ask different questions of it and then build up to a dashboard. And then finally, as part of this exam, you take elements of that dashboard and you make story points out of them. So it's almost like you're preparing a presentation to present back to like a CEO or an executive to actually show your story. So in terms of what Tableau suggests, they say that you should complete the Desktop 3 e-learning course. So that's assuming you've done the other 2 first, and that's the advanced learning course. So it covers things like calculations in complex views and enhancing dashboarding tools. So that may be using more nifty features like parameters and building more complex table calculations, for instance. Tableau say that course takes around 10 hours to complete, and it's very similar to the structure of the other 2 courses. I would recommend that you complete the Dashboard Design Visual Best Practices course. So that's aligned with the Visual Best Practices guide or white paper, and that will help you understand what Tableau are looking for in terms of how to present data. So for instance, they may say rather than show data in a data table, show data in a heat map. So you're actually bringing your data to life and drawing out those insights. They also may recommend that you sort bar charts from highest to lowest so they're easier to read, and they'll suggest some things around color and text as well, and just how to design a good dashboard. So it's really helpful if you read that white paper and also complete the e-learning if you can. In terms of my experience and my tips, again, read the study guide and attempt some practice questions. Unfortunately for this exam, there's not many practice questions to work through, and as far as I'm aware, there's no kind of website out there that provides you with a practice workbook. It's not like you can use learningtableau.com. They don't have any resources on there for this exam, and there's very few blog posts really on actually tips for this exam. So that's one area where you may struggle, but I've got a blog post on this and a few other people have, so it's, if you read mine, there's some links to other blog posts in there about other people's experience. But I'd say, you know, practice the questions in the study guide. That will give you a feel for the kind of things you'll be asked, and then focus on filling in knowledge gaps and also working through the visual best practices guide to understand how you can present data effectively and also understand what Tableau are looking for. You really need to practice using Tableau before you take this exam. You need to have had at least 12 months of hands-on practice, not just using dashboards other people have built, and also a variety of practice as well, like not just building the same dashboard day in, day out, or working with the same type of data. You need to be confident working with different types of data, using different chart types, working with maps, the whole product. There's a real focus in this exam on building vizzes quickly. Now you only have 3 hours, and I know that sounds like a lot of time. You're expected to do a lot in that exam. So when I sat this exam, I was reminded of like IronViz. So I competed in IronViz in Europe in 2018, and while I was sitting in this exam, I kept thinking back to IronViz because I had to build things so quickly. There's definitely a focus on this exam of, you know, not being perfect. So just doing things quickly and good and well, but it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. And what you produce in this exam may not look like what you produce normally, either for work or for Tableau Public. The areas to focus on that I found useful were parameters. So in particular, knowing how to perform a top N parameter. So that's where you do like a top 10 or top 5, and having a parameter so the user can control how many are in that top N. And also measure and sheet swapping using a parameter. So knowing that you can put a parameter on an axis and have the user swap what measure is shown on the axis, for instance. Nested LOD calculations, and this is one thing that puts people off taking this exam, is you will get a question on nested LOD calculations, or a question that requires you to use a nested LOD. So please, please, please practice these, understand how they work, and be confident using them before you take the exam. Even if you mess that question up, it's not the end of the world. I mean, you could get away with getting that question wrong and still passing the exam based on all of the other areas. So don't worry about it too much, but definitely focus on that and understand how they work. Again, you'll need to understand how to perform data joins and blends confidently. So knowing when to perform a blend over a join, and how to perform both well. You need to understand how to use story points. So story points is a feature in Tableau where you bring together multiple dashboards into a story. Some people have never come across this. It's something that I rarely see used in the wild, if you like, but you need to know how to use it for this exam, because you will be asked to build a story at the end. And as I said this many times before, visual best practices are really, really important. Just a few tips for during the exam. I'd say at the beginning of the exam, you're shown the scoring framework. This isn't something that I've seen available like publicly. I think the only time I saw it was when I actually took the exam, but it tells you the weighting that's applied to each question or each section. Now, pay attention to this because it will be useful. So you know where to spend your time if you look at this, and which areas you should focus on. You're given 3 hours, but they don't really tell you how long you should spend on each question. So that's up to you to decide. So take note of the scoring framework and kind of allocate your time out accordingly based on this. I was advised before I took the exam to go to the last section first and attempt that first, because you can attempt the questions in any order that you wish. So somebody told me go right to the end and start with question 6 and then work backwards. I actually regret doing that, because I think the exam is structured in such a way that you get some practice and you build up to the more lengthy questions. So it kind of gets you into the flow. So the beginning questions, let's say 1 to 3, are quite short. So I think one of the first ones will ask you to kind of make over a visualization and make it better. That shouldn't take you too long, maybe about 15 minutes maximum. Whereas the questions at the end are much more lengthy, and like I said before, you have this scenario and it kind of builds upon itself. So you're asking multiple questions of the same data set. So I found that I was moving around the exam quite a lot. So I was like, not completing it in the right order. And as a result of this, I nearly actually missed a question. So because you're using a virtual machine, it can be quite hard to kind of work the screen and see all the questions. And I recommend, pay attention, make sure you don't miss anything, scroll up and down on the window, make sure you've read all the text, and because some of the questions have multiple parts. So be really careful not to miss anything out like I did. And don't spend too long on a particular question. Like if you feel like you're getting bogged down, or you're getting stuck, or you're just spending too long like fiddling with things and making them look good, just leave that question, bookmark it, and go back to it later. As I said, you can complete the exam in any order that you wish. Now with this exam, unlike the others, you actually complete a Tableau workbook. So it's that's judged rather than looking at your answers to questions. So with the specialist exam and the associate exam, you get the results straight away. So you click a button and then within a few minutes, you actually get the result on your screen to show if you've passed or failed. Where with this exam, it's different. So you actually submit a workbook and that's actually marked. So it's a bit more subjective. So they actually mark it based on if you got the answer right, but also if you did an effective visualization, if you applied good best practices and things like that. So because of that, it takes longer to get your result. So I think with mine, it took me probably about 3 or 4 weeks before I actually got my result back by email to say that I'd passed. So yeah, so because you're working with a Tableau workbook, you'll have multiple worksheets. So it's quite easy for you to work on one question in one worksheet and then another one in a later worksheet, and flip between them. One thing I found really useful and helped me save time was adding descriptive titles. So what I mean by that is, rather than adding a title such as profit by state, actually draw out what you're seeing in the visualization. So profit was the highest in New York and the lowest in Texas, for instance, or profit was the highest in a certain year. Actually draw out what you're seeing and the key insights in that title, rather than just a title to show bar chart or something. And you'll find that's really useful, both to help with your data storytelling, but also when you move on to the story points exercise, where you'll need to write kind of an explanation about what each chart is showing and kind of what you suggest someone to do with that insight. And most of all, just be practical and don't be too flashy. And what I mean by that is, this isn't IMViz, or you're not producing something really nice and fancy for Tableau Public. It's purely focused on best practices. Don't go overboard. Don't try and create things that look amazing. That's not the idea of this exam at all. It's more on best practices and just being really efficient and create effective views. Okay, so just to recap, those are the 3 exams. And as I said, I'll share the workbook, and plus you can get all this information on the Tableau website. Now, before I continue, I just want to give a quick note on exam proctors. So with any of these exams, you can actually sit them at Tableau conference in person when there's an in-person conference, but you can also sit them online. So all of the exams I've taken, I've actually completed online. Now, I think that currently the exams are suspended because of the coronavirus situation. But when they resume, you'll be able to take the exams online again. Now, with any of these exams, they're completed in a controlled environment, in the sense that you're actually looked over by a proctor. So that's somebody who's like, it's like being on a Zoom meeting. So someone can see you virtually, and they'll make sure that you're not cheating, essentially. And they're also there for any technical support. So when you log into your exam, you'll be connected with a proctor, you'll have a quick conversation with them. They'll ask you to verify yourself, so you'll be asked to show a photo ID, so like a passport or a driving license, and actually hold that up to your webcam. And they'll also check your surroundings, so it's really important that you don't have anything on your desk or in the room that you're in. So make sure you clear your desk of any papers and things like that, because otherwise they'll just ask you to put them away. It's worth noting that all of those exams that I've just gone through, they're all open book. So in the sense that you can actually go on Google and kind of type in questions if you're stuck. There's certain websites you can't look at, but the majority you can. But I mean, that's a great thing to be able to do, but because you're so pushed for time in any of the exams, you're going to struggle to try to get the answers. So if you're going into that exam with little knowledge of Tableau and relying on that, you're not going to pass, because you're going to run out of time from all the Google searching. Now, while they are open book, you can't have physical papers or books on your desk. So when they say open book, it means you can just use the internet to help you find the answer. You can't use anything that's written down in front of you or your notes, for instance. So that's why it's important that you clear your surroundings. Also, make sure you're in a room where no one's going to come in and disturb you. So make sure, if you're taking it at work, for instance, that you're in a room and you put a note on the door to say for nobody to come in. Now, I took my associate exam in the Salem office in London, and our doors for our meeting rooms are glass, so I actually had to put a note up there telling everybody that please don't disturb me, because I was afraid that someone would walk in and I'd automatically fail. So yeah, and if you're at home, make sure that no one's going to come into the room where you're sat. Make sure your Wi-Fi is reliable. So the last thing you want is your Wi-Fi kind of not being strong enough or cutting out halfway through. If that does happen, you'll be asked to take the exam again. So I have a friend that happened to multiple times, and eventually she actually had to go to the Tableau office to complete the exam. Now, she wasn't penalised like financially for this, but obviously you don't really want to be completing the exam multiple times if you can help it. So just make sure that your Wi-Fi is strong enough. And they, in the exam guide, it will actually tell you, you know, what the expected like bandwidth is. And the last one might sound funny, but don't talk. So like I know people that actually talk to themselves when they're trying to think, and the proctors picked up on that and actually like told them off and said, you know, who are you talking to? So if you can avoid it, try not to talk to yourself, because it could be perceived that you're trying to communicate with somebody or cheat. So yeah, but the proctor's there to help you. They're not, you know, they're not staring at you. They're there just for support. So they help you get logged into a virtual machine, and make sure they're on hand in case something happens and they need to help you with a technical question, not related to Tableau, but just related to the exam setup. Then they don't have any knowledge of Tableau. They can't help you with anything of that nature. And before I go on, I'd just like to say, you know, leverage the community. So the community is there to help you, and there's so many resources in the community that you can actually use to help you on your exam journey. So mainly speaking, I'd say practice, engage and contribute. And what I mean by that is set up a profile on Tableau Public if you haven't already. It's a fantastic platform, it's free, and it gives you somewhere where you can actually share your work. So as well as you know, practicing for the exam, building workbooks, you can publish them here, and in doing so you'll actually build up a Tableau Public portfolio. So if you want something to show to a future employer, you can actually evidence how you use Tableau by showing them your Tableau Public portfolio. I know many people that have got a job based on what was in their public portfolio, so I highly recommend doing that. The community is a very like friendly, trusting place, and people are very willing to share their knowledge with others. So one way that a lot of people do this is actually participate in community projects, such as things like Makeover Monday, and I'll go more onto that more later. But what all these projects have in common is that they allow you a kind of avenue to practice and learn. So if you're maybe at work you're using the same data all the time and it becomes quite repetitive and you need to kind of expand beyond that for your exam practice, these platforms are fantastic because they offer you data sets, and they offer you in some cases feedback as well, so you can actually work with different data, try new things, and then get feedback on your work so you can see areas where you could improve. And you can also see other people's entries as well, so you can see how other people approach problems, get inspiration. Most people allow their workbooks to be downloaded from Tableau Public, so if you see something you like, you can actually download it and reverse engineer it to understand how it was built. So that's always really, really helpful. Social media is a big thing for the Tableau community, so if you aren't already, I suggest joining Twitter and connecting with Tableau people on Twitter, or LinkedIn as well. There's a lot of Tableau people on there and you'll see a lot of Tableau content on there. So both those platforms are really, really important for the community, and if you're on those platforms and you engage with people, you'll build up a big friendship group and a big support group as well that can help you with your exam preparation. As I said before, feedback is essential. So whether that's you get feedback from community projects, or maybe feedback from your colleagues on your work, or even feedback just from the community. So maybe you've published a viz and you'd like some feedback, then by all means, you know, publish that on Twitter or LinkedIn, and actually be open to feedback and tell people that they can come to you if they want to offer you some feedback to how you can improve. There's so many blogs and videos like on YouTube that are produced by the community. They're all free, so I'd highly recommend you go and look for those. Find blogs that you enjoy, read blogs about the exam experience. I've got blogs on 2 blogs about my exam experience that you can read, but there's plenty other out there. Watch videos on how to use Tableau. A lot of people publish videos to YouTube around both new features and different elements of the product, so they're really, really helpful. And rather than just take, try and give something back. So try and write your own blogs or videos. People love to hear different opinions. So even if someone's blogged about it or done a video on it before, there's no reason why you can't. So perhaps as you're learning Tableau, you could share your experience and what you've learned via blogs. It's a really good way to kind of solidify your knowledge. And lastly, try and answer some questions on the Tableau forums. So you may be familiar with the forums, you may go there to kind of look for answers to things, but try and actually answer people's questions, because that's a really good way to learn and just kind of get a deeper understanding of the product. Now, in terms of just community projects, there's Makeover Monday. So Makeover Monday is probably the most famous community project out there. It's run by Eva Murray and Charlie Hutchinson. So every week they publish a data set and a visualization of that data set. That's perhaps not the best, so perhaps there's some area for improvement. And then the community take that and then actually try and produce something better. So that's why it's called Makeover Monday. The data is actually published on a Sunday, and then you have all week to complete it, but I mean, there's no time limit really, so you could go back and complete some older ones. The data set every week is completely different. So that's kind of the beauty of this. You could have really big data sets, really small data sets, different types of data. I used to participate a lot in Makeover Monday. I think I started in week 9 of the first year that it ran, and participated around 20 to 30 times a year. And it was a fantastic way to learn. I used to challenge myself to try different chart types or techniques every week. So I was forcing myself to learn something new. And you'll get so much inspiration from other people that participate as well. There's a really great community around this. It's very supportive. And then one of the added benefits of Makeover Monday is every week Charlie and Eva, on a Wednesday usually, will provide feedback to people that request it. So you can actually put your viz forward for feedback, and people and Charlie and Eva will help you and actually give you some suggestions on how you can improve your visualization. Another great initiative is Workout Wednesday. So Workout Wednesday is almost the reverse of Makeover Monday. So you're presented with a completed visualization in Tableau, and you have to kind of figure out how it was built. So without looking at the workbook or reverse engineering it, you need to kind of figure out how the author applied certain design techniques, how they performed certain calculations, and essentially how they got to the end result. Now with Workout Wednesday, again, there's a very supportive community around this. You can go back and complete older Workout Wednesdays if you wish. Quite often they'll focus in on kind of new functionality in Tableau. So if something new's come out, so the animations, for instance, the team will usually produce a Workout Wednesday viz using this functionality. So it's a good opportunity for you to practice something new. If you want to get your head around things like set actions, parameter actions, viz animations, LOD calculations, this is fantastic. It's a lot more technical than Makeover Monday is. So Makeover Monday is really as technical as you make it, but with Workout Wednesday, you'll find that you'll get more hands-on experience with different, more complex calculations and more complex chart types. And then every week the team will share a solutions video, so you can actually have a full walkthrough of exactly how they built the visualization. And I guarantee that you'll learn something new if you watch those and participate every week. And then there's a few more visualization kind of challenges out there that are Tableau focused. So there's Iron Quest, which I actually founded last year. Iron Quest is based on the format of the Tableau IronViz feeders. So every month I will share a topic or a data set that I'll expect people to go away and visualize. Every month is completely different. And then you're tasked with building a visualization based on the IronViz criteria. So focusing on design, storytelling, and analysis. These are quite often quite detailed visualizations, maybe long form, which people like to do, and they really kind of tell a story and dig deep into the data. And then every month I'll team up with someone different, and we provide feedback to anyone that requests it. So it usually takes about 2 hours. We work through all the entries and provide detailed feedback on how people can improve their visualizations. This month, we're currently focusing on quantified self. And yeah, we're just looking for people to kind of track data about themselves and then visualize it. So I thought it was quite appropriate right now when a lot of the world are on lockdown, and people's lifestyles are changing. So it could be quite interesting to track data around that and visualize it. Another great initiative is Project Health Viz, run by Lindsay Betzendahl. So Project Health Viz focuses on health data. Every month, Lindsay publishes a new data set on something health related and asks the community to go away and visualize it. So again, it's similar to the other projects where you're all working with the same data set, so you can learn from what other people do. And there's a really rich community around that. So it's very supportive. You can reach out to people, and it's just a great way for you to engage and learn, particularly if you're interested in health data. There's Sports Viz Sunday. So this is great for anyone who's a fan of sports, any sports. So this is run by 3 guys, and what they do is every month they have a different kind of topic area. So they might focus on a different sport, whether that be football, tennis, rugby, cricket, anything. And they'll provide some data sets, but you're also quite often able to go and find your own or find your own data to supplement that, and just build a visualization on something that's sports related. They do a kind of roundup every week of anyone that's published a sports visualization with the hashtag SportsVisSunday. And it's a really good way to learn actually by visualizing data that you enjoy, particularly if you're a sports fan. And there's some really great work that comes out of that. It's always very inspirational. And the kind of the newest project of the 4 is the SDG Viz project. So that's focused on the Sustainable Development Goals published by the UN. Now this started this year, and every month they focus on a different Sustainable Development Goal. Things like improve like equal opportunities for women, literacy, hunger, things like that, all different things that are aimed at improving the world. And every month there'll be a different kind of topic to focus on. If you want to find any of these, it's best to look for them on Twitter, just using the hashtags, and you'll be able to find the links that you need to kind of how to get involved. And again, they're all very supportive, and they're all great ways to get involved and actually get you using Tableau. So my top tips for getting certified, just to recap, are to practice lots. This is the only way you're really going to learn is by practicing. There's no avoiding it. To complete some training. So that doesn't have to be paid training. There's plenty of free resources out there. So whether that be the e-learning training that's currently free, or the free training videos on the Tableau website. And if you can, maybe attend a classroom or virtual training. And you could probably get some videos off YouTube as well, which will be classified as training. So it doesn't need to involve any cost. And then lastly, engage with the community. The community is there to help you. They'll really help strengthen your skills and give you an advantage again above other people that don't participate in the community. So the community is kind of a number one. Please do that. Please share your work. Please seek feedback. And we'd love for you to be part of the community. So everyone's welcome. Okay, thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, just post them in the Q&A. If you want to reach out to me, I've got my contact details on the screen there. You can check out my website. I've got some blog posts on there, like I mentioned, on the certifications. And there's a link to my Tableau public profile. And please feel free to follow me on Twitter too.
Thanks, Sarah.
Is it okay?
Thank you guys for attending the sessions. I'll just share my screen and give you the details for. You can be a part of Meetup group. We are on Tableau by the name of @DelhiTUG. You can also track us down on the community tab of Tableau by DelhiTUG. These are the contact of our core team. So you can reach out to any of us if you have any queries related to the session. Also, you could drop us a mail if you're interested in presenting in our upcoming sessions. You can reach out to any one of us and also drop a mail to any one of us using this email ID. And if you have any questions, I'll keep this window open, Zoom meeting open for another 5-10 minutes. So you can post your questions under Q&A and we'll pick those as soon as possible. Thank you guys.